whenever you are ready.
Okay. My story of salvation isn't pretty. I didn't grow up in a Christ-centered home with a loving environment where I was taught that God was my Savior and that He loved me. My story of salvation is extremely dark, painful, and difficult to share. In the midst of it all, God assured me that this day would come when I would share my testimony and that His loving grace, forgiveness, and power would shine through. 11 years ago, during a time when Christ had no place in my life, I met an intelligent, handsome, charming man that quickly captivated me. He promised me the world, and it seemed as if I had finally found the one. He was funny, kind, and treated me and my children very well. We made plans to get married, and I agreed that I would move to wherever his career would take him, a decision I would later regret over and over. Fast forward 6 months, the first red flag I ignored. I found myself on our bedroom floor, a consequence of interrupting his sleep. I was completely confused and in shock that he reacted that way, and I brushed it off and we went on with life. During the next few years, my life went from being independent to becoming completely dependent on him. We were now married, and he had convinced me that I no longer needed to work. And now I was in his control. I was not allowed to ask when he was coming and going, where he had been, or where he was going. He controlled all finances and dictated how I was supposed to act as his wife. Violent arguments were constant in our marriage. Degrading, demeaning words began to break me down, and I could not understand the person he had become. I was living my life in constant fear, constant confusion, and I knew that at any moment he would snap. I quickly mastered the ability to smile if someone showed up unannounced, or if my children walked in the room after being verbally or physically attacked. I told everyone I was okay, even though it was clearly evident that I was not doing well. I was constantly covering up bruises on my arms and legs, hiding scratches and bumps. I mastered repairing holes in walls because they were a constant fixture in our home. During this time, he introduced me to what I would only recently discover as gaslighting. Gaslighting is an extremely effective form of emotional abuse that causes you to question your own feelings, instincts, and sanity. You no longer trust your own perception, and you begin to think you are crazy. He would throw things, call me horrible names, pull my hair out, punch my head, kick me, and even spit on my face. Then he would turn around and deny that those things occurred. He would smile, laugh, and carry on as if nothing happened. Little by little, I felt as if my spirit was lost. I felt ashamed, embarrassed, trapped, and so angry that my life was this hidden dark mess. When he introduced me as his wife, he would boast at how amazing I was, how beautiful and how lucky he was to be my husband. All games he would play to give me just enough false hope and to keep me at a constant state of confusion. He would ignite at the first opportunity he had if he was displeased with something I said or did. We would go to church, and I would watch him raise his arms during worship as if he was in full surrender to God, but knowing that it was all an act. Watching him do that left me angry, and I began to question and blame God. How could God create such a horrible, insensitive, violent human being? How could he, if he loved me, create such an evil, cold-hearted person that would become my husband? The more I distanced myself from God and blamed him, the worse my life got. Whenever I gathered enough courage to leave him, which was usually after being violently attacked, I would find myself so lost and in desperate need because I completely depended on him. So the moment he would come back for me, apologize, and promise it would never happen again, I would surrender and go back to him. He would quickly find ways to remind me why I left in the first place. We separated several times this way, and at times we spent months apart. Again, I will remind you that the story is not pretty. Because of the abuse in my marriage, the constant verbal degradation, and the feeling of worthlessness, it was very easy to find someone who made me feel better, made me feel special, wanted, needed, and appreciated. I was completely starved for affection, and the first person that showed me any form of love, I jumped at the opportunity. Once he realized this, he would come back with tears, apologies, and promises to gain me back. Again, I would fall into the trap, and my life would quickly return to the same violent, miserable, depressing state as before. As time went on, he became more and more creative in ways he could hurt me, tossing boiling water at me, pushing me down the stairs, coming after me with hot irons, and leaving me stranded to punish me. Whenever I threatened to call the police, he would remind me of the time he staged an entire crime scene. During an argument, he began to punch himself in the face repeatedly. He bloodied his entire face. He made sure that I would never dare call the police because if I did, he would threaten to do the same thing again. For a time, I lived in constant fear that he would make good on his threats. There were times where the pain I felt inside was almost unbearable. I hated myself for the decisions I made, and at times even wished I was dead. I contemplated suicide so many times over those 9 years, but could not bear to hurt my children that way. I felt so far gone and disconnected from life, my children, my family, and I constantly asked God, why me? Why was he allowing this to happen to me? I even questioned his existence. I felt so alone, so empty, and incredibly depressed. I believe this is when God began to reveal himself to me. He began placing certain people in my life to help me, but because I was still very angry, I was unwilling to listen. I continued to want to do life my way, and I believed that I could change my husband. I believed if I acted a certain way or looked a certain way that I could save this marriage. I was so wrong. The more I showed I cared, the more he took advantage. The more I showed love, the more he rejected me. The more I showed pain, the more he enjoyed it. And the more I showed fear, the more he terrorized me. My life was a complete mess. My heart raced, and my palms would sweat when he entered a room. My body trembled when I knew he was coming home, or when he became upset. The question that was the most difficult to answer: why did I stay? Why did I put up with so much? Why didn't I just leave him? I could run down 1,000 reasons, but the truth is, I did not have God in my life. I refused to accept that I needed him. I kept pushing God out of my life, thinking I could take care of my problems better than he could. I simply just ran away from him. September 2013, my entire life changed. In a fit of rage, he trapped my daughter and I in the garage of our home as we were trying to leave. I remember the look in his eyes as he walked back and forth around the car, staring at us as if he was an animal ready to attack. I was paralyzed with fear, and watching my daughter sit in the car with me crying did something to my core. I knew that if I did not leave him, I would end up dead. And who would be left to protect my little girl? Statistics show that domestic violence victims leave their abuser between 7 and 8 times before they finally leave or end up dead. This would be the 8th and final time I would leave.
That is a reason to say.
My name is Flor Overton, and this is my story of salvation.
Bring him all thy burdens, all thy guilt and sin.
That day God freed me from the grips of domestic violence. I knew that I couldn't keep running from him, and I completely surrendered my life to his will. I recommitted my life to him and learned the true meaning of walking by faith. All those fears of not being able to do things on my own that kept me chained to the abusive relationship were gone. I began to thank him for every single blessing in my life, for my children, and for our new home over our head, for my job, for the peace in our home. I remember thanking God for the first gallon of milk I was able to buy on my own for my children. Everything in my life was a tremendous blessing. I began to hear his voice, and I clung to Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. I threw myself in his word, and over time he began to heal my wounds and clear my mind of all the fog, fear, confusion, and guilt that held me down for so many years. He set my heart free. I was finally able to breathe again. For 9 years, I chased love from someone who was not able to love, and it nearly destroyed my life. All the time I was chasing the wrong thing and running from the one thing that has filled my heart. He's healed my wounds, and whose unconditional love has humbled me beyond anything I could have ever imagined. My prayer is that he lets my life be proof of his love.
There is freedom, taste and see. Hear the call, come to me. Running to his arms of grace, the burden carry. There is freedom, taste and see. Hear the call, come to me.